manufacture a headboard, bedside pedestals, and a large chest of drawers for us. We forgot about a dressing table. They delivered everything else. Then we asked them to do a dressing table. And the dressing table that they sent to us was the biggest abomination. In fact, it wound up as a bench in my workshop. It didn't look like any other piece of furniture in the bedroom. So 2 years later, I was talking to Don and saying, you know, we just can't buy another dressing table to suit the rest of the set. And he said, well, why don't we make one? Now, contrary to what Bill has told you, I'm not a cabinet maker. I've never done any cabinet work in my life before, apart from putting some legs on a tabletop. Can you still hear me at the back?
Yeah.
Good. So, with Don's persuasion, we decided we would try and copy the dressing table. They try and copy the furniture in the room. That's the finished product. That is a bedside pedestal, and that's where we started. The furniture that we bought was all made from Seligna and stained with a reaction lacquer. So we decided to be in keeping with everything else. We should also make sure that we use Seligna as well, much to our regret later on, but nonetheless, we went through it. As you can see, it consists of 3 drawers. It's got, let me come to that. I'll get a little bit out of kilter here. We decided to copy the pedestals, put a top on the pedestals, and put a box with 3 mirrors on the back. And that's where we went. So we started off with a pedestal. There are 2 miter frames there from the bottom of the pedestal. They're just in place there, and they have not yet been molded. The first problem we came across was trying to cut the miter joints. And I've got a table saw which is probably the best part of 40 years old. It's not as accurate as one would like. So when we tried to cut the miter joints, we ran into problems. What I eventually did was we cut a miter joint a little bit out of kilter, about a 46-degree miter joint, marked it off with a miter rule with pencil, and then took that to the disc sander and sanded it to the 45 degrees. And in that way, we managed to get them perfect. I was speaking to Oki at the time, and he came up with a design for this miter sledge, which he got out of some, what are they called?
Shop notes.
Shop Notes, Canadian magazine. So I made this miter sledge. It was a little bit late because we'd already done all the frames, but nonetheless, it works beautifully. And I just sort of mocked it up with scraps that I had. The top frame, as you can see arrowed there, see if I can get this thing to work. Yeah, arrowed there, is just put in place. Unfortunately, we were already halfway through when Dennis said to me, will you please do a presentation on it and take some photographs? So we didn't get photographs from the very beginning, but this is one here just to show you, not get glued and screwed. The box, of course, we made later, the drawer box. The drawers were sitting the size of the pedestals because the bedside pedestals were a little bit wider than we wanted on the dressing table. So we had to remeasure that. And in so doing, then, of course, we made a cutting list, went to Maple Street Timbers, and bought the Seligno there. I'm just going to refer to my notes as I go along to make sure I don't forget to tell you anything. All the joints were biscuit jointed. We used biscuits throughout, in preference to dowels. Primarily because I've got a biscuit jointer and I find it very easy to use. So they were all biscuit jointed. Checking for square in all the frames. We tried first of all to use a steel rule, and we found that the steel rule is inclined to sag a little bit between the 2 points. So Don, with his experience, came up with this brilliant, highly technical stick with a nail in the end, and all we simply did was to put the nail in one corner, mark off the other corner on the timber, and then go to the other diagonal and check that it was exactly the same. And after a couple of shufflings, it worked like a dream. I don't know if you want me to pass it around. It's just a stick with a nail through the end. In case anyone hasn't seen one of those.
Yeah, we see the point.
You get the point. Okay. The top frame on the drawer box matched the top frame on the bottom box. I refer to it here as the bottom box is this one here. There are two frames on the bottom, a frame on the top of that, then the drawer box, and a frame. That just simply shows you where the 5 mouldings are on the original pedestal, bedside pedestal. To make sure we got the mouldings right, I placed these pieces of scrap behind the moulding, the pedestal mould. And the idea was that then I could place this on the back of the frame and worked out exactly what writer bits I could use. See, the moulding on the pedestal was obviously cut by an industrial shaper. And I've got an Elume of 96, and it's got a 1/4 inch collet, so there was no way I could use the same sort of shapers. So it was a case of working out just what shape of the shapers that I had. I didn't buy any new ones, how I could make the same mouldings. I'll pass these around so you can get an idea as to which frame it belonged to, so that we didn't make a mistake. That's just to prove that Don was working with me. The surface on which you're going to run your writer is absolutely smooth, because if it isn't, you're going to get little kinks in your moulding, and that will give you problems. So that's the writer we used, and that's the size of the base we had, the table that we used. You see I put a hole down on top which is clamped on, move as I was pushing it through. It was fairly tricky, and occasionally we had to push it through 2 or 3 times to get a nice clean cut, because the frame obviously had a bit of weight and it was inclined to move a little bit. Every frame was marked as clearly as we could to say the top of the big box, which was the drawer box, that was the frame for there, the top of the small box, the top frame on the bottom of the bottom box. And it's really essential to make sure that you're marking things up properly, because if you happen to put the wrong moulding onto the wrong frame, you're screwed. You've got to start again. So we were very careful about that. It's essential to keep the frame, and it's essential to keep that frame level as you push it through the writer. Fairly obvious statement, but until you actually have to do it, you don't realize how easy it is to mess it up. Those are the mouldings that we did, and you can see it's hard to actually compare, but they're very, very similar to the mouldings on the original pedestal. And those were done just with a in order, and they're ready now for assembly. The frames were screwed onto the box. That's the bottom mouldings. Also now complete with the drawers in there. And something that we picked up at a previous meeting from Georgia, I think, was to mark everything with masking tape and put your marking on that. So every piece of the drawer, and there were obviously there were 4 pieces to every drawer, plus a bottom. The bottom was 3mm ply. The insides of every single piece, every corner was marked AA, BB, CC, DD on all the boxes, so that we made sure that we joined everything correctly. It's very important also when you're making a drawer to make sure that your biscuits go in the right way. Because if you put your biscuits into the drawer that way, as the face pulls, you can pull the biscuits out. So it's important to put the biscuits in sideways into the face, so strength to the pulling action on the drawer. It won't come apart. And obviously the drawer is supported on the side, so there's no tension there. Right. In placing the runners for the drawers, again we used something we picked up at a previous meeting from Dennis when he gave his demo on the kitchen cupboard drawers. He showed us how to make a template, how to calculate the distance between the runners. We made a template using plywood, which we measured up to see how far apart each of those runners should be to give us a perfect run on the drawers so that they'd all be evenly spaced. Not sure which way up that is now. Yeah, the bottom one. So the bottom one actually hangs down over the, closer to the moulding. It's only 2 millimeters off the moulding on the bottom. Running those, it worked out perfectly. We used that on all 4 sides, and we didn't have any problem at all with running the drawers. There was no rocking. As soon as we fitted the runners, everything just ran perfectly. Obviously, if you don't make your measurements and don't make everything absolutely square, you could run into some problems. But we were extremely careful using this highly technical tool that we evolved. And the drawers all ran beautifully. There was no rocking of the drawers. And that was the least of our problems then. So that was just a test run. In fitting the top, what we've decided as well was that we wanted to be able to disassemble the dressing table. There's nothing worse than having the furniture movers bashing it as they get in and out the doors and try and get it into the van, and mirrors are falling off and that sort of thing. So this is the very top of the pedestal, and it's a frame just under the top. We decided that this one. So we placed those 4 blocks. You see again we've marked the frames to say this is the left-hand side pedestal, this is the right-hand side pedestal. We put 4 blocks in position, made sure that it was nicely centered on the pedestal, on the drawer box itself. Put the 4 blocks in, and it was a nice tight fit. We chamfered the outer edges of each of the blocks just to give it a little bit of a easier to fit the top on. There it is, sort of sitting in position. And they were a very tight fit. You may think that, well, that could give a problem with trying to eventually fit the top to the pedestals, but in fact we surprised ourselves. It just fitted on so beautifully in the end. Fitting the drawer fronts was a new experience for me. I wasn't quite sure what to do, a bit of thinking. And what I did in fact then was we made 2 millimeter wedges, which is the standard, industrial standard of distance between drawers. We made 2 millimeter wedges to go between the drawers, put it onto the drawer box itself, onto the drawer face itself, and then, since we hadn't put the back onto the drawer box, we were able to put pressure onto the face. So the face was perfectly in position, just push the drawer box up against it, and the 2 stuck together. And they held well enough for us to be able to take the drawer out and put a couple of screws in from the back. And we did that with each drawer. Then we moved up to the next one, put the wedges in there, put the double-sided tape on, pressed the face onto it, screwed it, and then moved up to the top drawer. And you can see that it's a pretty neat job. The bun feet. What button? It's easy to get into trouble. Lost the sheet. Anyway, the bun feet, in the original pedestal, I discovered they were actually made from pine as well, so I didn't feel too bad about making bun feet from pine. And I had a 35mm piece of pine in the garage, so I gave me the nice center and also a place to put the screw in when I wanted to put the feet in position. There they are screwed on. There are the 2 pedestals. And you can see it. And now we're ready for the top. The top itself presented a problem for us. We used 3 cylinder planks, 200 millimeters wide, I think they were done. put weights on them, clamped them up nice and tight. 24 hours later, when we took the clamps off, we got a nice wave. Now, we're not quite sure why that happened. We could have clamped them too tight. Or, as we suspect, the cutters on the jointer were starting to go a bit blunt. And this proved to be true when we got to the box itself. Anyway, I tried sanding with an orbital sander, and that didn't help too much. It wasn't a big enough surface. H&S Timbers in Benoni here helped out. For 15 Rand, they sanded top and bottom for me, which was for nothing, and saved us an awful lot of aggro with a pointer. The tabletop there has now been done by them. I also put, obviously, it's probably about a 60 grit or 40 grit or something like that they use. The tabletop's not fitted there. It's simply, we're using the pedestals as a hold down so that I can run the rotor. When we started doing the box on the top, we used 100mm shorts for the box. And when we started putting them through the jointer to get them to the size we wanted, we found that we were getting a rocking on the timber. We could not get a nice straight joint. With the help of a couple of the senior club members, we said, can't understand what the problem is. It's been working fine up to now, and suddenly it's gone out. So we checked to see that the in-feed and out-feed tables were perfectly level. I took a straight edge and ran a little piece of paper under both sides to make sure it was absolutely perfectly level. Tried again, same problem. Phoned someone else, and he suggested, maybe your cutters are blunt. So we bought a new set of cutters, put them in, end of problem. So if you have a problem with your jointing, check your cutter blades. That solves that problem. The boxes there that you can see have been made for the tabletop. Again, simply biscuited to the top. The MDF panels in the front are to take mirrors. They're cut slightly, a fair bit smaller than the boxes themselves, to allow for the hinges to go in and to allow for the door to be opened. One of the other problems that we had then was if we put a mirror on there, and I didn't want handles or screw holes or caps or anything like that in the mirrors, I wanted it to be nice and plain, how do we get the door open? So we then, you can see we cut a groove under the mirror on the bottom piece. And that's about 15mm deep by 55mm. Just cut that out. It allows you to get 2 or 3 fingers underneath, and you open the mirror very easily. You can just make it out there on that one. The mirrors, I took can you see where it is there? Just over here? Yeah. I took the 3 MDF fronts along to East Rand Glass in Benoni and Lake. The problem then was how do we mount them onto the MDF? And I was speaking to them at Mica, they said there's an alkaline fix-all. It was unbelievable how quickly that glass stuck. You need one porous surface if you're going to use it. And you can stick glass to brick, you can stick any non-porous surface to a porous surface. Then it suggests the porous surfaces to allow it to dry. But it comes with like a little rake spatula. Just put a few lines down on the board, run the spatula over it to spread it a little bit, put the glass very carefully in place, because once you put it in place, it doesn't move. Just apply a bit of pressure to it, and I tell you, I could have put those mirrors up straight away. And it was a very neat, I think, a very neat finish. Prior to putting the mirrors on, I took the whole caboodle along to Clyde, who very kindly sprayed it for me with reaction lacquer to match one of the drawers from the pedestal. The problem that Clive came across when he was spraying it, he stained the reaction lacquer to the, you can see the inside's a little bit redder than the outside, and that's mainly because of the light shining on it. One of the problems that you have with Seligna is that the grain doesn't stand up on it like it does on pine, for instance, where you get a sort of, feels like sandpaper on the top. It actually comes up in waves. The soft grain stands up and the harder grain stays down. So, you know, you can sand it and make a beautiful job of sanding it with 400 grit or whatever you like. And as soon as you apply any moisture to it, up comes the soft grain. So, if you're going to do Seligna, try not to stain it. If you varnish it, it's easy to sand it again and varnish it again. But if you're putting a reaction lacquer onto it, as we did, you try and sand it, you start to get all the light grain coming through again where you've sanded. Shelves. I still want to change those little buttons to hold the shelves, to put darker ones in. The glass I also got from East Rand Glass. I find them to be the most reasonably priced. The problem we had when I put the glass shelf on, it was inclined to slide off those little plastic holders. So again, I put a small piece of double-sided tape onto each of those little pegs and various beauty treatments. That's only one box, you want to see the other one.
Is that yours?
Okay, the problems we had, I mentioned some of them, was the jointing on the Seligna with the blunt blades and how we solved that. Cutting accurate miters. If you've got a hammer or a felder, the frames we clamped, not with sash clamps, funny enough, but we used this, something I bought because I wanted to do some picture frames. It's a steel strap clamp, which I got at Hardware Centre. You can get them much cheaper at Pick and Pay. This was about 600 rand or something, Judy. I think Pick and Pay is about 150. But it worked very well for us, and you can clamp it up very tight. The clamping of the tabletop, I explained, it came up with rippled, and we're not exactly sure why. The checking for squareness, this little gadget works extremely well. If you're just careful with marking out your pencil mark, corner to corner, if the distance between the two corners is the same, you're absolutely square. And the grain rising during the staining. And that's about it. There's the finished product. Not quite in use. Couldn't get the brass or the bronze colored handles that we had on the other pedestals, but we managed to get these, are exactly the same design but a pewter color, from wholesale cabinet fitters in Bartlett. I think that was in the region of 1,800 rand. The glass was 176. The wood was about, I think, 700 rand. The wood was 796 rand and 2 cents. And of course the spraying. But about 1,800 rand, as against if we'd gone to a furniture manufacturer, probably in the region of about 3,000, 3,000 or 4,000. And we could not find someone to give us 3 mirrors with boxes behind. We could get 3 mirrors, but no boxes behind. Or we could get one big mirror. It just was frustrating trying to get something that looked the same as the one we had. That's the furniture. That's it. Thank you very much.
You know, what was the depth of the boxes itself?
350, 450, 450.
No, not the depth, the mirror box.
The
depth.
Oh, the box was 100, of which we took off 25 for the mirror, so it left us 75 in behind, which was deep enough. We actually had another dressing table from an old suite, which we put into the spare room, and we used that to sort of get the measurements that we wanted, and also to make it fit into the bedroom. We didn't want to have a huge dressing table that overpowered everything else in the bedroom. So we made the pedestals themselves about 100 mils narrower, so that the dressing table itself was about 1.45 mil in total with the mouldings.
Sorry, the top, the top, what about the end grade? Did you just leave it or just finish the wall?
Yeah, it was just molded and it was fine, yeah. Wasn't a problem at all. We suggested we should maybe put pieces down the side. No, it wasn't a problem. Selena actually cuts beautifully, but the big problem is that if you're using tungsten cutters, as Oki and Clive have explained to me, tungsten cutters blunt because they don't cut the wood, they chop the wood. One should actually use high-speed steel cutters and high-speed steel blade in your table saw. But of course, we learn as we go. So it wasn't totally mistake-free. We made a few mistakes, but fortunately they weren't mistakes because we rectified them.
So just some suggestions. Just a word of caution. When you're doing mirrors with those products like normal nails and stuff like that, you've got to be very careful. Some of those products are quite alkaline. And if you put on the back of the mirror, it'll actually eat the silver off the back of the mirror.
Yeah, true.
So you've got to be very careful. I know that Ben Braven make a product called Mirror Fix. And that's actually the ideal product you're supposed to use to do mirrors. And
Well,
it's the same scenario. We have a porous side and then a mirror on the other side.
this one apparently is made specifically for mirrors as well, the alkaline fix-all. Because I was going to use no more nails, and the guy Mike has said to me, no, this is the right one to use.
What happens there, either the alkalinity or the acids in the product actually eat the silver off the back and it actually coming through the mirror.
Well, I hope they don't. I'll be making new doors.
I do a lot of finishing with that dark color, and what I find works best is to use a normal nitrocellular staining sealer, and you spray your cabinet, sand it down. Then you apply a product called a matching stain, which is not a spirit-based stain, like your penetrating stain, it's lacquer-based. And you can spray that on top of your cabinet, and that will give you your color. So you solve all your problems regarding your grain lifting with your sanding sealer. And once your cabinet is 100% and you're happy with it, then you put the matching stain on, which gives you your color, and then straight over the top of that you put your reaction lacquer. Your acid catalyst will go straight over the top, and then you won't have a problem with it blotching or if you sand too much section will cut through, especially if you're taking a light timber and making it dark. Because it's so easy just to stand the corner and shoot up the light with.
Absolutely.
So
Thanks for that. Thank you
that
very
will
much.
solve the problem. So you put in a nitrocellular staining sealer, sort out all your staining problems, put the matching stain on, and then 2 coats of acid catalyst over the top of the reaction method, and that's sort it out.
Thanks very much.
May I ask you to email me that recipe, and I can reproduce it for the members of the
Yes.
club?
Yeah, be handy.
The guys at ChemSpec are very helpful. If you ever get to deal with the ChemSpec guys, they'll tell you exactly what I've just told you. So, but I can do that. Please.
Thank you.
Peter, I have a bone to pick with you. You said Dennis suggests. That implies I'm just taking a guess. Peter, I know damn well that the one side has to be porous, because otherwise the solvent doesn't evaporate and the stuff will never harden. So it's not a case of suggestion.
That's what they call bowing to superior knowledge.
Absolutely.
Sorry, could you say that again?
The polysulfide adhesive actually cured due to moisture in the air. And as you're putting it on, it starts to cure, so you don't have to have both sides.
But the product which he used and other products like No More Nails require one porous side so the solvent can, because those dried by evaporation of the solvent. The other thing, the problem you had with the glass shelves sliding on the normal shelf clips, you can get a special clip for glass shelves which has a little plastic-like suction cup, a standard 5mm hole going into the wood. That does a very good job for glass shelves. Little suction cups so they don't slide around.
You could, of course, have grooved the side and just slipped the glass in.
Yeah, we didn't think of it. And also, if you break it, then you can't get it back on again without taking the backing off.
That makes a good problem.
That's when the wife drops the perfume bottle on.
Any other questions?
Sorry, I just want to give this to the ladies at the back. Here's a summary of the slides I had on Seligna. Not the world's worst wood, as some people have believed. In fact,
You'll be lucky to get it.
That photograph of George's chest of drawers, we used Seligna as what we call a secondary wood. You don't want to use expensive beech to make hidden drawer sides and places. George, that worked pretty well, didn't it?
Yeah, I had absolutely no problem even with the finishing. That was the first time I used the Ligna. I was, like most people, apprehending not to use it, but I was forced because of the size of the drawers that I wanted, and I could only get that in Seligna, and I was very surprised with the end product. There's no distortion or anything. So I think if you choose your wood correctly and it's properly dried, you can't go wrong with Seligna.
And as George said to me, it looks a hell of a lot better than using SA pine for the side of the drawers. So here's a place for Seligna.
You'll be lucky to get your coffee table back.
Peter, thank you for a most interesting talk. I think everybody enjoyed it.
Only 4 people at the back fell asleep.
You're lucky.
And what did we first?
You mentioned bedroom suite and I just understand.
Yeah.
Peter, as both you and George, you and Don learnt a lot.
I learned
I'm
more than
sure we all learnt a lot. And hopefully a lot of other members will try and emulate what both you and Don have done. And there's just one thing left for me to present you with our little certificate. Just an appreciation for your talk this evening, for the effort you went into preparing the talk, and thanks very much, Peter. And I mustn't forget to thank Neville Anderson from Framing Arts and Crafts, who supplies us the frames. It's most appreciated, and I think we can give him a round of applause.